Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
Myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 6th of March 2016. Myself and Steve were chatting away again as usual when we just seen the time, so a little bit of a quick panic to get things started.
Yeah, so apologies for our tardiness. We do have a note.
Good evening, everybody. Right, our guest is going to be on shortly. Our guest is, he's just busy at the moment, so we're going to get him on Skype in about 15 minutes. The guest name is Dr. Martin Pall, and Dr. Martin is an expert in EMF, and he's actually found out categorically now that the likes of Wi-Fi and EMF are dangerous to your health, and it's through the voltage-gated calcium channel activation in our body that causes this. So we're going to be going into detail with Dr. Martin shortly when we get him on. But before we do that, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Yes, communication channels for OYM this evening are as follow.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, 046 927 1212 is the phone number for the studio this evening and every evening. If you're going to call in from outside the Republic of Ireland, the phone number is 00353 469 271212. We also have the chat room on the website there, that being OYMradio.com. You will see the link for the chat room on the left-hand side. You can log in there, and there's a friendly bunch of people in there awaiting your arrival. And they're there every week, and we want to say a big hi to everyone that's already logged in. And if you want to put questions up there for our guests, that is the place to do that. We also monitor People's Internet Radio chat room as well. It is peoplesinternetradio.com. You can log into the chat room there. A big hi to everyone who's also logged in there. You can stick up some questions there as well. I'm saying a lot of there. But I'm pronouncing it correctly, so that's okay. What else have we got? We have Facebook on the website there as well. Anti-social media. You can befriend us there, and there I go again.
There you go. There you go.
Yes, okay. Right, I'm going to concentrate on not saying there. Yes, Facebook, anti-social media. We are on Facebook. You can befriend us there. The anti-social media. Okay, stop.
We're going to have to do the shock treatment thing. Every time we say there, I'll press a button and it shocks you.
Yeah, well, you already hit me with the cattle prod, and that left a mark. Anyway, YouTube as well. We have the YouTube on the on the website there, also, and OYM. The TuneIn Radio Link application. Sorry, if you want to check us out on the iPhone, the smartphone, or the iPad, or your tablet, or any of those devices, we are on the TuneIn Radio Link app. Just pop along to your relevant download place. It is, I think, the iStore or the Apple Store or the Google Store, whatever it may be. You can download the app, stick it on your device, and just type in OYM Radio into the search bar, and that will get you to us. Alan.
Excellent, Steve. Cheers for that. Right, okay, as I said, we're going to get Dr. Martin Pall in a few minutes' time on Skype. But as usual, we have a few things that went on during the week. A bit of good news. We'll fill you in on Alan and Steve's week, but first of all, Steve is going to tell us all about the Mayo elections. Now, obviously, you know, people, we had an election. For international listeners, we had an election last week. Everybody went out voting, and the unfortunate news is that two of the mainstream parties, which a lot of people in the alternative media don't like, got back in again by the look of things. But Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, they did get back in, and it's all over the place. But anyway, it says here, Mayo independents are taking a High Court case over voting irregularities. Independent candidates that run in the general election in Mayo had a meeting on Monday the 29th of Feb on the issue of independent votes missing, and of the 2,400 that are alleged to be spoiled votes. The independent candidates are preparing a High Court paper that is expected to be lodged in the High Court. The High Court papers are to seek a High Court order of the recalling of an election in Mayo, the four-seater electoral Ballot boxes in transit for up to 8 hours seemingly with no accountability, and up to 10,000 independent votes unaccountable. Now we've heard that before, and we have, I think we discussed it last week, and there was a valid point made in relation to that. In the UK, when they have ballots, and probably in a lot of other countries, once the ballot closes, the votes are counted straight away. Okay, there's still a room for error, but over here, like the voting finishes at 10 p.m. and the ballot boxes are locked allegedly, and they're secure, and the votes are started. I think they start counting at 7 a.m. the following morning. So there's a couple of hours there where anyone could go in and, you know, just get a load of ballot papers, print them off, and stuff them into these boxes. I mean, anything can happen. So I do hope that there is a re-election, to be totally honest with you, and maybe it would be done correctly, because, you know, we know a lot of people, and because we do what we do, there's a lot of people on board with us, and a lot of people didn't vote for mainstream. They voted independent, or they voted for different parties, but they did not vote for Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil or Labour. But yet, when the votes were counted, the three most hated people in the country over the past 5 years, being Enda Kenny, Alan Kelly, Mr. Irish Water himself, and John Burton, they all got re-elected. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, there's something,
I don't believe it, I'm sorry.
I just think there's something very, very fishy there. And Dermot was on the show last week, Dermot Murphy, and he said he's seen things when they were doing the counting, and he just said there's something suspect. You know, now we're gonna say allegedly because we've no proof, but just something smells. Really, really does. I have to say that. And talking about, you know, Alan Kelly and the Irish Water, well, people are apparently cancelling Irish Water direct debits en masse at the moment, because there was a mention that Irish Water might be scrapped. I think Simon Coveney let it slip about it being scrapped. Now, there are no refunds for anybody who's actually paid money, and it's also been mentioned that they will go after the non-payers. Now, you imagine if you have, like, I don't know, 40% or 50% of the people not paying the Irish Water, and then everybody else that were paying cancel their direct debits. Good luck with trying to get everybody to pay the water. I mean, it's not going to happen. And then they're saying also it's something, it's going to cost X amount of billions to close down Irish Water. I mean, talk about wasting the Irish taxpayers' money. Really, these people just don't know how to run a business, really, and we vote them into government. I don't know. Anyway, Steve.
Yeah, we actually had an email during the week from Dr. Carol Rosen. Below is a portion of some of the correspondence she has received. It says, below is a portion of some of the correspondence I have received. This is obviously written by Carol. Today, from a contact who was retired from the Defence Intelligence Agency regarding carbon monoxide emissions along the San Andreas. Malone's and Ellisnore fault. Yes, I should have practiced those before. I started saying them. But the fault systems starting in February the 26th, 2016. Historically, carbon emissions of this magnitude have preceded major earthquakes with major loss of life in India and China. Carol says, I am sending this information out to anyone I care about who may have friends or family in the affected regions. She goes on to say, be mindful that there may be very little time before the fault zones break loose.
Well, we've heard about Yellowstone, and we've heard about this before, about the San Andreas fault, and they made a movie in Hollywood all about San Andreas, funny enough.
Yes, they did.
Are they trying to tell us something there? I don't know. They also made a movie in BBC in early 2000s. It's on YouTube about Yellowstone as well. So again, are they telling us something there? I don't know. Something just to bear in mind, something to keep in mind if you do have friends or family over there. Tell them to keep an eye on things, just in case something happens. That's all. So it's just a heads up, really. Is it going to happen? I don't know, but we just said we put it down there, just so people know about it. Now, there's a YouTube video going around about it's American police, and I don't know whether people have seen it. And there's a pregnant woman in labour, and she's forced to prove her water is broke, and effectively molested by the cops at gunpoint while she was on her way to hospital. So basically, her husband was driving to the hospital because she was in labour. And he rang 911 and said, look, my wife wants me to keep driving because she's in labour. But he eventually pulled over. And then the cops just, read them the riot act, and it said here, the cops forced her husband to the ground while they molested her, and then they joked about how he would be in jail while the child was born. They even threatened to taser him for no reason and said that they would delete the dashcam video. Now, the thing is, would this happen over in Ireland? Would our Gardaí do the same thing if that happened? Now, I know some people might go, no way, our Gardaí wouldn't do that. Well, we actually did hear a story, and I spoke to the girl that it happened to, where they didn't have, she was 8 months pregnant, they didn't have road tax because they couldn't afford it, and basically the guard pulled them up, and she was with her husband at the time, lucky enough, and the guard took the car off her. You know, regardless, the fact that she was 8 months pregnant, it didn't even bother him at all. He didn't say, look, this time I'm going to let you go, but, you know, be careful. 8 months pregnant, so they took the car off her, and she was forced to walk to the nearest train station and get a train home.
Unfortunately, I mean, that's a horrible incident, and that video that you spoke of on YouTube, I started to watch it. I think it came up on my radar, and I did start to watch it, but I couldn't watch the whole lot. I turned it off because it was actually quite upsetting. To think that that's the kind of the mindset of the cops in America at the moment, like that's how barbaric they will be, that they will drag a woman out of a car 8 months pregnant, and she has to prove that her walls have broken.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so wrong. And to think that they would do it over here as well. Would the guards do it? Yes, the guards. I think they would. Maybe not all guards. It's like, as you said before, you know, there's good apples and there's bad apples.
Yeah,
and I don't think that all Gardaí are saints. I'm sure some of them over here would do that. In fact, there was an incident a couple of years back where a woman, I can't remember the whole details, but her phone was in the Garda car, and she was recording the conversation, and when she got her phone back, the guards were laughing and joking and telling her, you know, that you might get raped and all this.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, I mean, they're not all saints.
That was down in Curragh, I think.
The gas line, yeah.
Yeah, the gas line. Right, okay, now, on Alan and Steve's week, which we're going to do shortly, basically we had, to cut a long story short, there's a chap that we met up with who's very interested in looking at investing into OYM, but also the alternative media in Ireland generally. And we met up with this chap, very nice chap. We had a 5 to 6 hour chat yesterday, and we still didn't get through everything. We had loads to talk about. But we had a great chat, grub and everything else, and we just talked about everything and put everything out on the plate and just, you know, expressed how we felt about certain things. And it went down very well. But we're going to talk about that in a few minutes on Alan and Steve's week. The one other thing before we go there, though, is a mention to a company called Sign Fit Ireland. Now, these guys are fantastic supporters of the alternative media movement, whether it's the Hub or the National Land League or OYM. Fantastic guys there. And basically, I don't know what you heard, but Dermot Murphy from the Westmeath Land League, who was on last week, was donated a van where he could go around and help educate people that there is a way that you can stay in your home. And basically he's going to go around with the van and have signposting on the actual van, posters and stickers and everything else to give out to people. And Dermot said that he's more than happy to put a poster up of OYM on the back of the van as well to advertise us, which is very kind of him to do that. So we contacted David at Sign for Ireland, and we sent him over the graphic, and we said, let us know what the cost is. And David just said, listen, you guys, you know, doing a great job. We're all part of the fight. So as you're involved in the alternative media, you know, we'll sort something out. So we just said, well, you know, that's definitely worth a mention on the site, and thanks a lot for your support. So again, Sign for Ireland. If you want to contact David, his phone number is 087 261 9581, 087 261 9581, or the email is signfitireland@gmail.com. So if you have any printing to be done, please ring up David and get a quote and give him the support and business, because businesses like that are really helpful and help, because money is very tight with everything, but any business like that, you know, we try and advertise and give our support to them. So brilliant information. But
and if you do ring him, just let him know that you actually heard the shout out here on OYM.
Yeah, brilliant.
He might knock a few quid off. We can't promise anything, though.
Yeah, you never know. How's your week, Steve?
Yeah, uneventful for the most part, I have to say. The highlight was actually, the highlight was on yesterday when we met up with the chap that we met up that we will talk about shortly. What else is there? Yeah, Enda Kenny. I just seen it. Enda Kenny. Seemingly he's again. I don't know if this is confirmed, because I've kind of since the result of the election, I've kind of just put politics in the same box in my mind where I keep all my jokes, because it's laughable. It really is. But seemingly Enda is threatening that if he wants to kind of form a government, and he's offering people seats in the cabinet and all this sort of carry on, and but he wants to be the head boy. He wants to continue to be the Taoiseach seemingly, and if everyone agrees to his terms and conditions, he'll lead the country into another fine mess. So we can't wait to see what happens there. And what else? Michael Jackson and Robin Williams. I was just talking to Alan there about Robin Williams yesterday. Something came up on the radar during the week about Robin Williams, and I was just reading an article, and the way that kind of things go on the web, you read the article, and before you know it, you know, 10 minutes later, you're on another page somewhere else, and you're watching a video. But I was watching a video of a guy, I think he's in the UK, I can't remember his name actually, I do apologise, but he was doing this thing called a ghost box, and it was quite interesting. Anyone who hasn't heard about these ghost boxes, it's very interesting, where he alleges that he can contact spirits in the spirit world, and he has video footage of Robin Williams' alleged voice coming through, saying that that I'm dead and stuff like that. And the more I looked into it, seemingly this is big business, and there's people doing it all over the world. So I haven't actually heard of it in Ireland, but I think we may have. It may have come up on the radar here before, something about EVP. But anyway, that's I was watching that, but then Michael Jackson came up on the radar after that, and like some people say, we're conspiracy theorists, because we believe in this, that, and the other, the fluid belief system, of course. We're conspiracy theorists. So I just wanted to say, well, what are we supposed to believe? And seemingly there's a lot of stuff out there that, as conspiracy theorists, we're supposed to believe. We're supposed to believe Elvis is still alive, okay? And we're also supposed to believe Michael Jackson is still alive. And someone put up a video on the internet. Now, I don't know whether this is true. I don't know if it's genuine. I just watched it for the hell of it. But they were offering proof that Michael Jackson is still alive. There was allegedly he walked out of the ambulance when he was brought to hospital and was rushed indoors. Seemingly he's grown a beard and a moustache and was at his own funeral. They were showing him in the audience, and another woman turned around and she made some gesture with her mouth. She said something with her mouth, which when you're looking at it, I don't read lips, but it looked like she may have been saying modelling or something. Right, I don't know, but the guy said, no, she's saying Michael, because she's after kind of seeing this guy, Michael, and they showed different clips, and I tell you, they were offering lots of proof to say that, the king of pop is still alive, and that he may have faked his own death because of, many different reasons, and I suppose we'll never know.
No.
But, it's quite interesting.
He grew a beard that quick from his death to his funeral.
Well, I don't know if he grew. It could have been fake. I don't know. But no, it's just kind of funny where the internet leads you, and there's so much stuff on there. Now, again, I'm not poo-pooing anything. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's not true. But it's just interesting that because we do what we do, we're kind of supposed to believe this. Now, as I say, is the man still alive? I don't know. But if Elvis is still alive, he's doing a damn good job of concealing it.
Exactly,
he really is.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's really it. There's not really much more to the report. How's your week?
Not too bad at all. You're going to shoot away and get Dr. Martin on there while I quickly have a chat about this. So basically, we met up with, we won't mention any names, but we ended up with this nice bloke who's interested in investing in OYM and the alternative media in general. And we had a great conversation. We had a great chat, talked about everything. And it was just it was a good chat, good. We just wanted to. This is the initial meeting, and we're going to be talking we're going to be meeting up with him again. We're going to have more meetings, and we're going to work because we want to. This is a long-term thing. It's not going to be like a shot in the dark. We're planning to hopefully have it as a long-term thing, and And fingers crossed. I can't really say much about it at the moment because it's in the very, very early stages. We just had the meeting yesterday, but it's sounding very promising, and things are going, well at the moment, and we're in communication and we're talking to each other, and we're looking to put certain things in place now at the moment. And it's just funny that we had the 300k plan on the website, and although we're not going down that's a lot of money. It's not going to be anything near that. But at the same time, there is some funds there which we're looking at. This chap is looking at putting up to just improve the overall OYM and the alternative media side. And fingers crossed. If we all work well together and things go according to plan, then, we really we'll have a super alternative media network in Ireland. And
you are whetting the appetites of people there.
I know.
This is it's like a trailer for a movie.
No, wait, the horror bit has to come in now. You might be seeing OYM on video.
Yes.
That's a scary bit.
That is scary.
So make sure your kids are in bed before, you see us.
You may see the faces behind the voices, and trust me, as the old saying goes, voices for radio.
Exactly. Well, we'll see. We'll see. It's early days. We'll see what happens. We're still talking about stuff, loads of stuff to go through and organise, and phases and everything else. But it's looking good, and a great guy, and very laid back, and knows what he wants to do, and his focus is service to others, which is fantastic, because that's what we look for. And he wants to make a difference. He wants to make a change, which is brilliant. That's exactly what we're looking for. So he's on target there. So as I say, we'll keep you posted and let you know what's going on. The last thing I want you to do before we get Dr. Martin on, is Dr. Martin ready to go there? Okay. Is if anybody has ever used the promissory note, or anybody that has used the promissory note to pay for their mortgage, can you please contact us and let us know? Because we have a request from one of our listeners who wants to know if anybody has successfully used the promissory note to write off their mortgage. Now, we know Michael Tellinger has a video out telling you how to do it, but it doesn't really apply to Ireland. So if anybody knows anybody that's done it successfully, please contact us and let us know.
And that would be a fantastic show in itself.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, it will be. We'll have to get somebody on and talk about that. Right, now, without further ado, we're going to get a guest on, Dr. Martin Pall. Now, Steve has a bio, so if you want to let us know what the Dr. Martin's background is, that'd be brilliant.
I will indeed. Dr. Martin Pall, Ph.D. He holds a BA degree in physics with honours. He's earned his Ph.D. in Biochemistry and Genetics at Caltech. He is a professor Emeritus of Washington State University in Biochemistry and Basic Medical Sciences. He received 8 international awards for his work in environmental medicine and research into the impact of chemical exposure on human health. A published paper in 2013 on mechanism of action in EMF exposure and how EMFs impact the cells of our body.
Fantastic. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Martin on. Good evening, Dr. Martin. How are you?
Hello. Are we on?
We are indeed. We are live on OYM. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
A big thank you for coming on to the show. I know you're very, very busy, and we only kind of read out a portion of your CV, so to speak, your background, and I know it's huge. Your background and your qualifications and your research and what you've done is phenomenal. It's incredible. The main thing, obviously, that we're focused on tonight is the fact that you have found through your research that you can kind of categorically, prove. You can prove that through the voltage-gated calcium channel activation in our bodies, that wireless technology, the likes of Wi-Fi, can actually affect us and damage us. And there's a couple of people out there that would disagree with that. We're going to be talking about that in a minute, about the article that I did email over to you, and we talked about it. But do you want to add anything to what we read out regarding your bio? Is there anything else that you want to add in there to let people know about your background?
Well, why don't we just deal with it when as we go along? Because we don't want to spend time just on my background. So, let's go on with it. But let me just make one point. I think that the voltage-gated calcium channels activation we often abbreviate them VGCCs, is a real game changer here, because we've been previously in a situation where we really didn't know what the main target or targets might be for these EMFs, and now we do, and this makes a huge difference, because in medicine and in biology we know a lot about how to look for things when we know what we're looking for. It's vastly more difficult when you don't have the foggiest idea what you're looking for. So basically we're in a situation where we can really nail things down very easily, and that makes a huge difference.
Okay, well, let's just touch base on the article I sent you over. There's a physicist over in the UK, and his name is Dr. Robert Grimes, and basically he's basically a cancer researcher at Oxford University, and he wrote a column in the Guardian newspaper last week all about the Wi-Fi and wireless technology, and he said, well, it's actually safe, and what they're telling you is actually wrong. So when I seen the article, I sent it off to yourself and your colleague Peter there, and I asked your opinion on it, and fantastic, you got back to me. I was only expecting about a paragraph, but you did about 4 or 5 paragraphs of information why he was wrong. So I know I'm not familiar with this David Robert Grimes, but apparently when they want to convince people about the technology and tell them the wrong thing, he's normally wheeled out, he does an article and then they wheel him back in again. So let's start off with that article that I sent over to you, and why you feel he was wrong and what he said, and if we just could start off with that would be great.
Okay, well, I think basically the problem isn't the premise he starts with is actually right. The problem is what his interpretation is of it, which is not right. So basically what he argues, and many other people have made very similar arguments, is that these microwave frequency EMFs, which is what we're talking about here, that the photons that make them up are very low energy, and that's absolutely true. And so when you compare them, for instance, with ionizing radiation, the photons have less than 1/1,000,000th of the energy of the photons of ionizing radiation. So there's a huge difference in the energy. And they basically argue, well, these photons are too weak, so they can't do anything. There's another argument that I can raise later. But the problem basically, first of all, is that they're not working as individual photons. And I started out 2 of my papers basically starting from the same point that he started with, and other people have started with. And namely, these things are not, the individual photons don't have enough energy to impact the chemistry of our bodies, so how can they affect our biology? That's the basic question. And the answer to it is that, first of all, it's not the individual photons that are active here, it's the fields as a whole. And the fields as a whole activate these channels, these voltage-gated calcium channels, and these are channels in the outer membrane, the plasma membrane that surrounds all of our cells. And when the channels open up, they allow calcium to flow into the cell. It's the excess calcium in the cell that's responsible for most, if not all, of the biological effects. So that's a huge breakthrough, and we know a lot about what calcium can do in the cell, and basically by various kinds of pathways it can act to produce a lot, many different problems if there's too much of it. So that's kind of the simple response.
Okay. What kind of technology are we talking about? I mean, let's break it down to the technology for people that don't have a scientific background, like myself and Steve. Yeah. But the technology that's out there, what are we talking about? Which, because obviously it's very hard to be healthy in an unhealthy environment, which we are told by Dr. Michael Kelly, who was on the show, and he's correct with that. And we are surrounded by smog, electric smog everywhere. So tell us about is it basically all wireless technology, or is there any technology out there that's safe?
Well, let me just say, I don't think there's any technology that's been determined to be safe. And in fact, most of the things that have been looked at, which include, people living near cell phone towers, cell phones, cordless phones, Wi-Fi fields, we're being exposed to huge numbers of wireless communication devices.
Yeah.
And the number one problem is not one of these is tested biologically for safety. There is no biological testing for safety. They just get put out into the market, and the industry, of course, claims they're safe. And all of the claims of industry on the safety are based on the assumption that only heating is the only issue. In other words, if you have a device that produces little or no heating, the industry position is, well, you don't have to worry about it. And all of our safety guidelines and standards are based on that notion. And the notion is just simply wrong. And it's been known to be wrong for well over 40 years. And what the industry does is it continually ignores a vast amount of evidence. And much of it, as I've already stated, was already out there 40 years ago, and claims that these things are safe. So it's all, there's no substance to this.
Okay.
Now, yeah.
I was just going to say, when the World Health Organization released a report in 2007, and they say there's safe levels of non-ionizing radiation. What's your take on that? Because for me, I mean, the fact they're saying that the fact that it's radiation is like saying, well, look, if you smoke 5 cigarettes a day, you won't get cancer, but if you smoke 20, you will. And to me, radiation, whatever form it comes in, to me, I'm sure it's dangerous.
Well, let me say, okay, the point that they make, and it is a legitimate point, is, as I said, that these microwave frequency EMFs are much different from ionizing radiation, which is the usual stuff that we worry about, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're right in terms of the premise. The problem is that they didn't have a mechanism when they started making these claims. Now that we have a mechanism, they're ignoring it, and so basically, the industry is in trouble, I think. But of course, when you've got billions and billions of dollars, you can be in trouble for a long time, and it's others that suffer from it. So that's kind of where we are. Maybe I can talk to you a little bit about what, and you raised the issue, well, is any level safe? I think probably there are levels that are safe, but they're so much lower than the kinds of levels that we're exposed to all the time that in some senses it's sort of irrelevant to the practicalities of it at this point. One of the things that I did I had a big paper published in 2015 in Reviews on Environmental Health. They had a number of different things in there. One of the things is that these VGCCs, the voltage-gated calcium channels, the opening of those channels is regulated by something called a voltage sensor. And this is a part of the protein molecule that is the voltage-gated calcium channel. that detects electrical changes. And this is the normal way in which this channel is opened in our normal physiology. It turns out that when you look at the structure of that voltage sensor, and you know some basic physics, you come to the conclusion that this voltage sensor is exquisitely sensitive to very low intensity EMFs. And the forces put on the voltage sensor are about 7.2 million times stronger than the forces put on singly charged groups that occur elsewhere in the cell. So basically there's a lot of force put on this thing by these weak, low intensity EMFs, and that's why they get activated by them. And that's why, and industry, of course, denies any possibility that these things can happen. But in fact, now we know what the target is, and now I think we know why it's the target and why it's so sensitive to these things.
Yeah. I think we're going to get deniability from the industry because the technology is so integrated into society now. For them to turn around and actually say that it's going to cause a problem and it is causing health problems, it would just say we would be sued. The litigation alone would cost them billions. So deniability has to be applied. Steve?
Yeah, Doctor, we have a question on the chat room there from one of the listeners, and he's wondering, would the guest say that the testing/guidelines for alternating current are safe?
No.
No.
In a word. Okay, so let's talk about that, and that's a very important point. It turns out that the EMFs we get from our power wiring, which is I think what you're referring to, our electric power lines, and whether they're sort of normal voltage power lines in our house or whether they're high voltage power lines, outside, they you use 50 hertz in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those 50 hertz, and in the U.S. we have 60 hertz. Those fields will activate these VGCCs in at least somewhat similar way to the way microwaves do. So, here again, we have a situation where the safety guidelines simply don't hold up in terms of the science, and all of these relatively lower frequency EMFs, they're much lower, say, than the ionizing radiation. As far as I can tell, they're all working in very much the same way. That doesn't mean they're all equally active, but when they're active, that seems to be the way they're working.
Okay. What do you think is causing the electro hypersensitivity? We've had a few ladies on our show, and it was a difficult interview for them because they're using technology with EMF coming off. And right. Some people are susceptible to the EHS and other people aren't. Do you have an idea what's going on there?
Yeah, and I can kind of outline at least part of it for you. So I think that a lot of the, what's called EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, is very similar in a lot of ways to what's called MCS, multiple chemical sensitivity. And in multiple chemical sensitivity, we know a lot more about what's going on than we do with EHS. Let me say again, industry will deny that, but it's true. That we know a lot about MCS. Basically, the way in which chemicals act, and they do this indirectly, is they activate some other they're basically channels as well, that are called NMDA receptors, okay? And when those NMDA receptors are activated, they also allow calcium to flow into the cell, okay? And so that suggests that excessive calcium in the cell has a very central role in developing the sensitivities to chemicals as well as the sensitivities to EMFs. And so I think that, and one of the mechanisms which I think is is involved, is increased sensitivity of the synapses in the brain. This is called neurosensitization, and it's probably involved in both of those. And there's another thing that's involved that is a vicious cycle mechanism that I've worked on for years that I also think is involved. But what's interesting is now we're starting to get information that the exposures to these are not only, we're not only sensitive to the effects of the excess calcium in the cells. In the case of EHS, it's becoming apparent that the VGCCs actually are extremely sensitive. So they become much more sensitive than the VGCCs in normal people, probably because they're regulated differently. And so so I think we're getting more and more information about this, and it's starting to fit together. Of course, you'll have the insurance companies and other organizations will deny everything that I have to say.
Of course. That's Lloyd's of London will insure anything, but they don't insure you from radiation from mobile phones. One of the things they don't do. Now, is there a switch or a mechanism in which this kicks in? Because one of the ladies we spoke to who suffered from EHS, she worked in the hospitals and in the 90s, and she was fine up to a period, and all of a sudden she had to leave because she was affected by the EHS, the EMS fields. So something must have triggered that in her body to all of a sudden be affected by it. Have you come across what that could be? Do you know, is there symptoms or something that gets triggered?
Well, I think, in general, it's thought that the more, it's the exposures that cause it. And what the problem is that, we have, we keep increasing exposures day by day, week by week, month by month, because we're introducing new devices. We've got cell phone towers all over the place. We have Wi-Fi fields all over the place. We're putting, radar units on cars so they can drive themselves or at least warn us when we're getting too close to something. It just goes on and on and on. And these, they're just huge numbers of things that are problematic. And as I said before, none of these, not even one of these, is ever tested biologically for safety before they're put on the market.
That's
all the safety claims are based on this theory that you only have to worry about heating, and the theory's been known to be wrong for over 40 years. So that's the situation we're in. That's
incredible, because over here in Ireland, they're trying to install what we call Irish water smart meters, and we had Dr. Barry Trower. Dr. Barry Trower is a great friend of OYM, and
he's not a doctor, by the way, but Barry Trower is a wonderful person, and I think he's a great source.
The physicist, I'll say, physicist Barry Trower, and Barry's a good friend of OYM. He's been on the show multiple times, and he said the same thing, that we have Irish water meters being installed against their will, against the will of the Irish people, and in 2018 they're planning to put in the smart meters from the electrical grid. Now, we did a pre-record interview with Catherine Albrecht, which we're going to be airing on the show in a few weeks' time. But since you've been in the States and you live in the States, what's your experience with the smart meters over there?
Well, there have been many, what are called anecdotal reports of people reacting to smart meters. And so I think the smart meters are among the worst of these things. But you can always argue, well, anecdotal reports really aren't that reliable, and there's some truth to that. There have been 2 studies that have been done on health impacts of smart meters. One of them was done in Australia, and the other one was done in the U.S., And as far as I can tell, they were all done with nickels and dimes. That is, nobody's supporting this research, but it's very important, it has been done twice, and both of those found multiple health impacts. So so there's some real data on this, and and the industry people will tell you, well, there was never, when they introduced these, there wasn't any evidence of health effects, and that's true. Nobody looked, so there was no evidence for health effects, so this is the kind of crazy world that we live in, and now we have some information.
Hello?
We all right?
Oh, yeah, we just lost you there for a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that, I wrote up a statement actually for a suit regarding smart meters, and one of the statements I made, when industry said that there were no known health effects, they were right, because nobody looked. And now people have looked at least twice with these two different studies, and they're finding health effects. And then I continued to say, well, I'm sure that industry would argue we need more studies, and I would agree with that. But one other thing that I think is very clear, and that is it was completely and utterly irresponsible to introduce smart meters without biological testing.
I totally agree. One of the things we were told by Barry was the whole history of the chair of the committee that approved this technology, which was Dr. Michael Rapiccioli for the World Health Organization, and he chaired the actual group to approve this technology, and the World Health Organization sent out this report based on their findings. And then they found out later that Dr. Michael Rapiccioli was actually a consultant for the communications industry, so that means there's a conflict of interest. They did end up sacking him, but apparently the World Health Organization decided to go down the deniability route rather than come clean and say to people that it's actually dangerous. Because there was a report going around, I think there's a chap over here, an American chap called John Weigel, and John says he has a copy of the report, and where the actual World Health Organization has associated 600 different illnesses related to wireless technology and the damages that it could cause. I am trying to get that report off John. But this report that was sent out in 2007 was basically the report that the countries in Europe were using to actually say that it's safe. So, like in Ireland at the moment, apparently, according to Barry, Wi-Fi and the likes of Tetra has not been approved. They're only basing the approval of it through this report that was sent out in 2007.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell for you? Have you come across that information?
I haven't really looked into the things that you were just discussing. I do know that Rapiccioli has been criticized on this, but I really can't comment about this, in any detail. I'm sorry, there's stuff coming in here. What? Oh crap. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can, yeah.
You're probably hearing these bells coming in here.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know how to turn them off.
Okay. Well, you've heard about that anyway, so you're familiar with the Rapiccioli story and what went on there.
Yeah, well, let me just say, there was in 1971. The U.S. Office of Naval Medical Research put out a report in 1971 where they reported over 100 different non-thermal health effects, that is, effects that are not due to heating, that are to these microwave frequency EMFs. That was in 1971, and those included 40 different what I consider to be neuropsychiatric effects. It affects on brain function and behavior and psychological kinds of responses.
Yeah.
8 different endocrine things, hormonal effects, cardiac effects on the electrical control of the heart, which are life-threatening, chromosome damage in the cells, cell death, what we now call apoptosis, that word wasn't known then, and changes in the testis. The structure of the testis was abnormal in these exposures. And there are a whole bunch of other things, but those were the main ones, I think, that were important. And, since then we've had many, many other things that have been extensively documented in the scientific literature. And one thing I think that's important to note here is the following. Last year, 2015, there was a appeal signed by 206 scientists, all published scientists who published peer-reviewed papers in this area of how these EMFs influence our health, and what this appeal said was, first of all, the safety guidelines and standards are inadequate because they only deal with heating and don't deal with non-thermal effects. And so I think it's clear from that alone that there is a scientific consensus that that these safety guidelines and standards are not what we need, and that there are substantial health effects. That there's a consensus on that in the scientific community. I think that's an important point that needs to be repeated over and over and over again, because otherwise, you just get steamrolled by various kinds of propaganda that tends to be put out.
Yeah, like Dr. Robert Grimes, who obviously isn't familiar with what you're talking about, maybe, and he has a...
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a propagandist. I don't know enough, I mean, I don't really know enough about what he's doing to make any comment on that. All I'm saying is that I think his conclusions are wrong for the reasons that I stated earlier.
Okay. If they've known about this for over 40 years, why are they carrying on doing it? Why are they still releasing this technology knowing? Because I know, obviously, with EHS, I think Sweden, what I know of, Sweden is the only country that recognizes this as a medical condition. And if you go to the doctor and you suffer for you've been diagnosed, they will move you out, they'll relocate you. But I only know Sweden being the only country that does it so far.
Yeah, well, let me just say, your question, and you raise, why are they doing this? Well, obviously, there's huge amounts of money involved in it, right? You've got a $1 trillion set of industries that are making huge amounts of money on these things, and so that's a difficult thing to deal with, obviously. But I think the other thing I think that's important is that to say, and I've tended, I do think EHS is a major problem, and I do think it's a real physiological response that that at least we know more about now than we did a few months ago even. But regardless of that, it is still there is still some legitimacy to say that, well, it's still somewhat controversial. The controversy is not completely contrived, okay, let's put it that way. But what's also true is there are huge numbers of other things where there should be no controversy at all, in my judgment. The fact that you can, that, for instance, that, there have been extensive animal studies done that have shown that these EMFs have absolutely massive effects on the brain, structure and function of the brain. The fact that these things can cause male and female infertility is a huge thing. The fact that you can get changes in the DNA of cells that have been exposed to these EMFs. You get single-strand and double-strand breaks in the DNA, and you also get 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine in the DNA. So these are all important changes in the DNA that may be involved in cancer and various other things. And of course, there's now extensive evidence with cancer. There's extensive evidence of breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, and many other changes as well. And so, we are in a situation where it is very rapidly approaching an absolutely existential crisis. That these things are attacking each of the four things that we most value, I think, as individuals and as a species. It's attacking our health in multiple ways.
Yeah.
It's attacking our brain function. It's attacking the integrity of our genomes, and it's attacking our ability to produce healthy offspring. And all of those things are major concerns. So, my feeling is, yes, EHS is a big problem and we need to worry about it, but these other things, there is extensive evidence that all of this stuff is going on. And to deny it is unsupportable in my judgment.
Totally. We're going to go off to questions. We have a lot of questions. Steve is doing a lot of typing here, so there's loads of questions coming in. But just a couple of things before we go over to them. There's a new technology coming out called Li-Fi using light frequency. Would that be something that would be of benefit to move away from the Wi-Fi and go more with the light frequency? Would that change things around to for better from a health point of view?
I think they would, but of course you always worry about something, is it possible that when you get into that you're going to start finding some things that you didn't expect to find? None of these things are it's not, there may always be things that we haven't thought of when you introduce a new technology that you think, well, this is a much better way to do it, and it may well be. And one of the problems, I think, for instance, with Wi-Fi, you don't need Wi-Fi. You can wire things.
Yeah.
It is not, and so if you hardwire them, and at home, I don't have any Wi-Fi. I just all this stuff is hardwired, and yeah, it's a little less convenient, but when you're destroying your brain function, when you're probably going to develop cancer, when you become infertile, when you become, I suppose I'm too old to worry about fertility, but, when you have difficulty in sleeping, when you have all kinds of neuropsychiatric effects, these are all major things, and they're all well documented, and it's time to quit pretending that they don't exist. So, but I guess the point I was going to make with regard to the Li-Fi, is that what it's called?
Li-Fi, yeah. Li-Fi.
Yeah, Li-Fi. So right. Is if you have it in within a glass fiber, then of course it won't be going out anyway, and so that might be the best way to do things.
Okay. Before we go off to the questions, this is from one of our listeners, and he just wanted to know if you heard of a chap called Dr. Becker, MD, who has worked on regeneration using electrical current and silver.
I've heard of Becker. I'm not familiar with that work. Let me just make a general statement about this. There are genuine therapeutic effects of these fields. Okay?
Yeah.
And I've written on them in 3 of my papers. And they are well documented. They can be explained as being caused by the VGCC activation and the excess calcium in the cell. So I don't think that it's I don't think that it's a mystery on how these things probably work. But it is important to recognize good things as well as bad things, and and so I've done that, and I hope others will do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what we're trying to do is trying to educate as much as we can. Now, we're going to go over. I've seen Steve doing a lot of typing there, so I assume there's loads of questions come in.
No, I was just typing a letter to me mammy.
It's Mother's Day today over here in Ireland, so
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Steve, you shoot away. I'm sure you have a lot of questions there for Dr.
Absolutely.
Martin.
Yes. One of the questions that came in, Doctor, was from David, and David is wondering: would taking more magnesium help balance out the increase of calcium absorption by cells due to Wi-Fi and mobile communication devices?
As best I can figure out, magnesium may be somewhat helpful, but it's a relatively minor effect. But magnesium is a good thing to take anyway, because most of us are low in magnesium, and that's not a good thing to be. And I think it will be helped. There's some help, but it's not as big as there's some other areas I think where magnesium is probably more important.
But is there anything that maybe you could recommend that would be of benefit to help with the increase of calcium absorption?
Yeah, there is, but the question is how can I explain it to you in a simple way? I think that there's a regulatory system which I think can be useful, although explaining why it can be useful is a long process. And it's something called NRF2, NRF number 2. And there is both some observational studies and some theory that basically means that we can expect that it probably is useful. And that's been my personal experience with it. So, for whatever that's worth. And, but you can get a lot of information on NRF2. You can go into the PubMed database and just search under that name. There's thousands of papers on it. And there are many different, nutritional factors that act to raise NRF2. And they basically are all the nutritional factors that are well recognized as being health promoting. So, you can't go wrong with that, I suppose, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just jump in here quickly? On the people that are suffering from EHS, is there any recommendation you can say to them, any advice you can give them on what to do? I mean, apart from the obvious to try and get away from it, but...
Avoid exposures. Yeah, well, I mean, I do think NRF2 is useful, and I do think avoiding exposures is useful.
Okay.
And magnesium probably is somewhat useful as well. There are some other things that are probably useful, but basically, in terms of diet and those kinds of things, you want to have a low inflammatory diet, because this is an inflammatory type of fact, and so you should avoid. Our diets tend to have a lot of omega-6 fatty acids and relatively few omega-3s, and they should be better balanced, and so that's an issue. And but there are many others, and you can look up information about low inflammatory, low inflammation diets. There's a lot of information. I'm not telling you that all of it's good information, but it's probably worth looking at anyway.
Yeah, no, great. That's brilliant. I mean, just to pass on to people that suffer from it and give them an option to do that. Steve, you got more questions there?
Yeah, well, just
let me just say something else before we go on here. I'm a Ph.D., not an M.D. Nothing I say should be viewed as medical advice, okay?
And can I say the same, that myself and Steve aren't a Ph.D. or M.D., so don't mind what we say.
Yeah. No, I was just actually, while you mentioned the Nerve 2, I just typed it into a search engine here, and there is plenty of information on the World Wide Web in relation to Nerve 2. Yeah. And there's just one sentence here that I found. It actually came on Wikipedia. Again, obviously Wikipedia, we take that with a grain of salt. But it says here, Nerve 2 is ubiquitously expressed with the highest concentration in descending order in the kidneys, muscle, lung, heart, liver, and brain. What would that mean to the? Could you break that down into kind of layman's terms?
Oh, I don't. Is
that more of an MD thing?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know whether actually that's the best way to look at it. But I suspect that what they're looking at. So one of the things that raises Nerve 2 is low level oxidative stress. And so if you have a tissue that tends to generate oxidative stress, and the brain certainly does that, and I think probably all those tissues that you mentioned do it. That's probably why Nerve 2 is more active in those tissues. But, but I'm not sure that's terribly useful to the concept of what's going, what we're trying to do here.
I think they're going to have to do the research on that and check it out themselves. Really, yeah. I think that's be the best thing for them to do.
But definitely, there's a lot. Even on just on that one Wikipedia page, is a lot of information in relation to Nerve 2. So it's quite interesting. I've never heard of it before until you mentioned it there this evening.
I published a paper in that's available full text off the PubMed database, and so if you want to find it, you just put my last name Pall and initials ML. And put Nerve 2 down, and it'll come right up, and you can click on it and get the whole paper for free. I just tell you one other thing about it. It was published in Acta Physiologica Sinica, a Chinese journal, and actually has a Chinese abstract and a Chinese title, although it has also an English abstract and title. So, but don't worry about that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm in the right place, but I did go on to pubmed.gov, and I do have 4 articles here now, and I think one does actually have your name on it, so I will post that link up in the chat room for anyone who may be interested to check that out. Where we go? Next question. Well, we had one there from David. That was in relation to the Li-Fi. You've already answered that question. Mm-hmm. Any man is wondering, prepay electricity meters. Do you know anything about them? Now, just in relation to those, we have them over here. I'm guessing you have them over there in the US as well. Over here, there's a little box that goes inside your home. You type in a number, and your electricity flows. It communicates with another little box outside. Now, I did ask the guy when he came around to try and sell me one of those meters. Mm-hmm. I said, how does the keypad communicate with the device outside that you fit beside the meter? Mm-hmm. And he says, I don't know, he says. I said, right, would it be a Wi-Fi signal? Like, what frequency would it be on? And he couldn't answer me, so, I looked it up, and there wasn't that much information on the internet in relation to it. But I just wondered, would you know much about those?
No, but I'm sure this is, pretty much a standard wireless communication device, which means that it's probably working somewhere in the microwave frequency range. Let me make one other point about these things, though, that I think it's important for your listeners to know. All of these wireless communication devices communicate via pulsations. Yeah. Okay. And it's well established now that in most cases, not all, but in most cases, pulsed microwave fields are much more biologically active than non-pulse fields. And so if you have what's known as a non-pulsed or a continuous wave field, it tends to be much less active. But these things are all communicating via pulsations. So what that means is that they're probably going to be much more biologically active, and so that's problematic. But these things they're not simple. You can't. We don't know enough about how one pulsation pattern is going to compare with another, for example. So people talk about things like cell phones, One kind of cell phone may have, somewhat different pulsations than another one, even though they're doing, quite similar things. So, you can't assume that these are all the same, and you can't assume if one of them, has a fairly good safety rating that some other one is necessarily going to follow. Let me make one other point about this, and I think it's an important one. There have been a number of studies published by industry that have claimed that both Wi-Fi and cell phones are safe. That's what they claim. These studies have typically used not real cell phones and not real Wi-Fi, but they've used EMFs that are different and apparently don't pulse as much. So so basically they really don't tell you about the real thing, and that's a problem. And then the question is, well, why aren't they studying the real thing if they really think the real thing is safe? That's a good question.
Well, it goes back to ethics, and as you say, it's all about making money as well. The smog. It's just, we've had a couple of people on talking about different things, and one person who worked as an orderly in the hospitals in the 70s, he couldn't understand why, with the amount of people actually giving up smoking and going for a healthier lifestyle, why the increase of cancers started to happen from the late 70s onwards. Well, he noticed it from that time. It was probably before that. And a lot of people are saying the same thing. We come across it all the time where they say, we can't understand it. So many people kind of don't smoke these days, or they've given up or what have you. And yet there seems to be a massive increase in all different types of cancers. So there must be something causing it. And of course we talk about not just the food, but the electronic smog that's out there. And of course there are kind of solutions, but we've tried to approach this area with our local government, with our government over here regarding the technology. And if you go and speak to them and say, and explain to them the situation and what we feel the story is about it, they just send you, I recommend, if anybody wants to test this out themselves, if you contact the local Department of the Environment and ask them for the proof that the wireless technology is safe, they will still send you the WHO report from 2007.
Yeah.
And also, we're talking about, the other technology we have over here is the Tetra radios, which are Gardaí, which is the police force that we use. Now, according to Barry, they used to have Tetra in the States, but they don't use it anymore. But in the UK and in Ireland, we're using Tetra. And there's been a lot of cases of the police officers coming down with different kinds of tumours and cancers and everything else. So it's throughout our society. And it's just amazing how, people aren't waking up to this, especially with Wi-Fi in the schools as well, because myself and Steve are dads, and our kids go to school, and there's Wi-Fi everywhere in the school. And there's a lot of reports of kids having certain symptoms because of the Wi-Fi. Now, I know in France recently, there's a lot of schools pulling the Wi-Fi out because they realise it's dangerous. But trying to convince people, this is the hardest part, trying to convince people that it's actually dangerous is really, really hard, because the first thing they'll say is, oh, well, if it was dangerous, our government wouldn't put it out there. They wouldn't, let it go into schools and stuff like that. Is there any arguments that we can use that you have come across or think we should be saying that would help kind of wake these people up to the dangers of the Wi-Fi and the wireless technology?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking here. Let me just say something. I know that this is a difficult issue.
Yeah.
I also think, however, and this may be in part because I, as a scientist, can make statements that carry more weight than many other people's statements. I find when I talk to people, and that I think there are a lot of people who are aware that there's stuff going on here that's not, that's not right. And I think people are getting more and more skeptical about all these assurances that they're getting. So I don't think it's a hopeless thing, but I think you have to work on it. It's going to take a lot of work. But I do think we are going in the right direction in terms of, the public view of these things. I think people are becoming more and more aware that these assurances of safety are not worth much at all. Let me just say, I just flew into London a few days ago, and when you go through the immigration thing and talk to the fellow there, and he asked me what I was doing there, and I said, well, I'm going to be giving some a medical talk here, and he said, well, what are you going to talk about? And I said, well, I'm going to talk about how electromagnetic fields impact the cells of our bodies. And he looked at me and he said, and I bet it's not good. And I said, yeah, it's not good. But then, of course, industry will deny all of that. And he turns to me and he says, of course. So I do think that there are, and people are becoming more aware. And I think that's true in the U.S. I think it's true in Europe. Do we have a long way to go? Yeah, we do have a long way to go. And we don't have the time to really wait to, for this to go really slowly. It's got to go much more rapidly. But, so I don't think it's hopeless, but I do think that it's going to be a lot of work. And, you just have to keep working on it.
But this is what we're trying to do on the radio show, is to educate people, have people on like yourself, who can come on and talk about it.
I think the number one thing, or one thing that you really have to work on is, when various kinds of propaganda statements come out, and they come out all the time, and first of all, most of them are based on, we're within safety standards, and then you say, well, but there are all these scientists that say the safety standards aren't any good. So what good does that do? That's one approach, that's one response, I think, that needs to be put out over and over and over again, and eventually it'll have some impact. The other thing is that, of course, when you've got propaganda coming out from companies that are making huge amounts of money, you ask, well, sure, but do you trust people who have this huge, gigantic conflict of interest? And if so, why?
Exactly.
So those are some of the things that may help a little bit anyway.
Okay. We have a few more questions for you there, Steve.
Yeah, we have a question from Del on People's Internet Radio chat, and Del's wondering, I think this is I communicated with Del to find out if this was off the phones or Wi-Fi, or if it was off the smart meters, but I haven't received a reply. But Del says that the measured signal is represented as, inverted commas, mean, M-E-A-N, but given it is a pulse every 15 seconds, is it not deceptive to publish it as such?
Well, okay, so I think what Dale is saying is correct about each of these devices that you just named, and yes, I do think it's absolutely, it's misleading, yes. And but the other thing that's misleading about it is the thing that I mentioned before, and that is we know that pulse fields are much more biologically active than non-pulse fields. So to compare them with something that's a continuous exposure, which is essentially what you're doing here, is misleading for that reason as well.
Yep, I think that answers Dale's question. And moving on from that, I think you may have answered it. You may have kind of answered this one, but or maybe you didn't. Sorry, but Joan is wondering: does your guest think Wi-Fi may be used for depopulation of the universe?
Well, I guess I think that it may be an unintended consequence, but I doubt that that's intentional. But
Well,
it's certainly likely to have that effect. Yeah.
let's put it into context. That question a little bit, because it's a bit kind of. Let's put it into context, right? So, the pharmaceutical industry do not make money from people who are healthy, but if you look at the actual cost of the chemo drugs for cancer. You're talking about 40,000. I believe that's the quote I was given by someone. 40,000 per patient to cure cancer. So if a lot of people are getting cancers and tumors because of the environment we're in, and there's a lot of money to be made there by the pharmaceutical industry as well. So there's a kickback there for people being unhealthy.
Yeah.
So,
well, you raise a good point. Yeah. I think that part of the thing is perhaps, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the pharmaceutical industry is quite as diabolical as that. But I do think that they are.
Oh, you're gone again there, Dr. Martin. Are you there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, just lost you there a minute.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. You sounds like maybe you're cutting out now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So, I think the thing with regard to the pharmaceutical industry that's of concern is, or one of the things that's of concern, is that they make a lot more money in giving drugs to people who are chronically ill that don't cure them. So, because then you can keep giving the same drugs for year after year.
Treating the symptom and not the cause, yeah.
Well, yeah, and so so that's a substantial issue, I think, and but I don't know, we have many problems in Europe and the U.S. and various other parts of the world, and the EMFs are, I think, number one among them, and I really despair about whether we're destroying ourselves by, you could have a catastrophic decline in fertility, and if you have neuropsychiatric effects among the children who are born, and I strongly think that there's probably a big increase in mutation frequencies because of the DNA damage in the germline cells. And there may be other things, like the autism epidemic probably involves EMFs. It's really quite chilling, and I think, the cancer thing, which is obviously important, may not be at all the most important problem that we've got here. There may be, I think probably the neuropsychiatric issues are important. The germline, the damage to the DNA of the cells is very important, and the fertility issue is very important. I suspect that each of those are probably much more important than cancer, and cancer is, God knows, not a minor problem at all.
Well, Barry produced a report called Wi-Fi, the new thalidomide, but who cares? And I think he quoted in there that 56% of the female population, which is their kids, will actually be sterile with the actual the advent of the technology and it causing sterility in the kids.
Yeah. No, I know he's been very concerned about sterility in young girls going to school that have Wi-Fi fields. I mean, he's been concerned about that for years, and I know that he's been concerned, and he's been traveling around the world at his expense to try to educate people.
Have you ever been in a situation where people have asked you to, from a legal point of view, to represent them in your field to talk about this?
From a legal point of view?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what's going on, somebody will say, well, we need an expert witness, and they might say, Dr. Martin, would you be able to stand up and talk about what you know in your field to actually say that this technology is dangerous? Have you ever been asked to do that?
I've written statements for legal situations, and I've done that both in this area, and I've also done it with multiple chemical sensitivity. So I have experience with that. I've never actually been called as a witness in a proper trial on these. What I found is one of two things. Either, if in some cases the statements that in at least one case, the statements that I prepared were not admitted into the court. The court simply refused to look at them.
Yeah.
And so then obviously, there's nothing that I can do. But in other cases they have been admitted, and typically what happens is that the other side wants to settle out of court, and they usually do. So, but I haven't actually gone to court and testified at this point on these things. But
that might be interesting, because we have a group over here called the Irish Doctors Environmental Association, and one of the doctors was Dr. Michael Kelly, who's been on our show talking about this, and they actually sent a report to all the schools in Ireland regarding the dangers of Wi-Fi, and they were told by the Department of the Environment to actually throw it in the bin, that they're conspiracy theorists, and to ignore it. And this is why I was wondering, with statements from yourself, to actually say that this technology was dangerous might add some kind of strength behind their argument regarding the technology. Well,
I've made statements. I've had, I have a number of YouTube videos where their, statements can be taken off of them, or the videos can be used in total. Of course, I published a lot of things on these things and intend to publish still more. I think there's a lot to be done, and
I think we do have an uphill struggle, but it is happening. People are waking up to it. I think we have a few more questions come in there. Steve?
Yeah, we have, Joan has come back on there, Dr. Martin, in relation to her question, and she said that her question is quite important, because if we look, as you mentioned, at the young girls where possibly might not be able to have children, or possibly have children with disabilities, in relation to gene changes, she reckons that if she says, would that not deplete the universe, as those Wi-Fi those who obviously have been exposed to Wi-Fi, have children where their DNA is changed forever. Where does the doctor see this?
Well, I agree with the point that she's making. I don't, it's extremely worrisome. I have to say, since I got involved in these areas, I've had a number of nightmares, and I hadn't had nightmares for decades before. This stuff is really horrendous. And I say that as someone who has worked before on the chemical issues, about what chemicals do, and chemicals are a huge problem as well. But in my judgment, the EMFs are a lot worse.
Dave?
Yep. No, I agree. At the end of the day, we've heard a lot of people saying over the 6 years that we've been doing what we're doing, and anytime anyone has come on and spoke about the dangers of Wi-Fi, everyone has kind of hinted that, some people do say, if it damages DNA and renders people sterile, then that's not what it's designed for. It just happens to be a kind of, what would you call it? Not an after effect or side effect of the technology. But then some people,
unintended consequence.
Unintended consequence.
The way it's described. Yeah.
Yeah, but some people have actually said that they reckon. Again, this is up for, conjecture. Some people say that it was designed that way because the people who designed it were fully aware of what it could do. And on the other end of the scale, some people say that there is a depopulation program, and this is kind of their magic bullet to depopulate the planet.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't know. I guess I don't think that the companies that are putting out Wi-Fi have any vested interest in causing the population to crash.
No, I mean, I don't believe that they're. I think when technology is tested, it's my understanding that people will test it and they will go for whichever is maybe the cheapest that they can roll out, and maybe Wi-Fi just happened to be cheapest.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there are a number of us in the scientific community who've written this in our papers. We need to test each of these things biologically before they're ever put on the market, period. And I think that, I think that's something that's very important to stay over and over and over again, because as you said before, a lot of people think, oh well, the government wouldn't allow us to put things on that are unsafe. They're never tested for safety.
Yeah.
So how could the government doesn't have any information at all about biological effects of these things when they are being sold? So it is at least when they're initially sold, and often they don't seem to pay attention to the information that comes in later. So I think again, there are things that one can say, and if you repeat them enough, people will come to understand that they have some truth to them.
I was just thinking there when you were talking about the release of the equipment, is it a case that it's just a case of the technology gets better? And if you look back at the likes of asbestos and thalidomide and stuff like that, 20 years later they turn around and say, oh well, actually we found out now that asbestos is dangerous and it can give you cancer. But at the time they just didn't have the technology to actually investigate it, and they were, maybe naively, they release it without actually testing it, thinking that it's safe. And it's only down the road, now we have more technology. Technology is much, much better than what it was 20, 30 years ago, that we're now investigating this technology and finding out that actually you shouldn't release it because it's dangerous. Is there a bit of naivety in it that the profit margin of the technology is much better, is better for them rather than them actually coming out and looking at the physical effects of the technology? Or is it just down 20, 30 years down the road, we've got better at researching it?
I don't think, I believe that there was, for instance, with the asbestos, that there was already some information back in the 1930s that asbestos could cause lung cancer. So I'm not sure that that it's really true to say, well, we didn't know about it for all those years. One thing you might want to look at, there's a book that was published in the U.S. By an academic, and it's called, it's entitled "Doubt is Their Product."
Okay.
And basically what it describes is, in a number of different contexts, the way in which different industries have basically tried to convey the idea, well, we don't really know this, but then they come around to the idea, well, since we don't know about it, you really shouldn't worry about it. It's that kind of thing, and there's nothing in there about EMFs as far as I know, but there are lots of things about asbestos is one of the things they talk about, and a number of other chemicals, and they also talk about the climate change issue as another example, where basically you have an industry that has a big vested interest, and this is a way of keeping their profits high and making people use, encouraging people, let's say, to use their products. So I think, I think if you look at that book, you'll probably get some insights into this thing. I know I did.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Can we go through the technology that people should really be, what they can do? So you said at the start of the show, which is what we've done here. Everything has to be hardwired. Switch off your Wi-Fi. The deck phones or the walkabout phones apparently are lethal because there's no industry regulation. There is on mobile phones, but apparently there isn't on the deck walkabout phones, and they're quite lethal. So try and get rid of them. Your microwave oven, again, another item to get rid of. And I know mobile phones, it's a necessary evil, but I think in most cases, when I use my mobile phone, I actually put it on speaker, and I used 90% of the time I use text messaging. Steve?
No, I was going to say even a headset. I've looked into this, and people are saying that if you use a headset connected into the phone, that the phone is still radiating, but it's not up to your ear. So if you use the headpiece or whatever, not the Bluetooth now, just the wired one.
Wired one, yeah.
There are many things that can be done to improve the safety of these various devices. There are lots of, and that doesn't mean you can do them as an individual necessarily. Although, as you just pointed out, there are some things you can do as an individual, and you can certainly, hardwire your devices in your home. The problem that this is a very complex area, and when you start getting into it, what you find is, well, okay, I've done these things, but then there are these other things that I haven't done, and of course, just walking around, cities and towns, you get exposed to all kinds of stuff. You live in an apartment complex, and what are you getting? You're getting the Wi-Fi from your neighbors. Is there any way of dealing with that? Well, yeah, you can put shielding up on your walls, and there are ways of doing that. And I think we need to start demanding that, that there be restaurants that don't have Wi-Fi, and there be hotels that don't have Wi-Fi, at least in some of their rooms. And so, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are lots of things that we need to start demanding. And, and if we do that, the companies will, it'll take a while, but the companies will start responding. I think, the same thing, at least in principle, ought to be true for the airplanes, because aircraft, of course, when you fly, you tend to get exposed to Wi-Fi all the time.
I was actually going to say that to you. If you do a lot of flying and you're on an aircraft that has Wi-Fi, like years ago, you're going to have a smoking section, no smoking, and have a Wi-Fi and a no Wi-Fi section.
Well, you could do that. The other thing you could do easily, if the airlines wanted to do it, is, again, they could hardwire the damn things, You can hardwire a plane just like you can in your house. So you don't really, and the problem with Wi-Fi is not just the Wi-Fi field, it's also the signal that your computer is putting out, communicating with the Wi-Fi antenna.
Yeah.
So, and of course, about the worst thing is when you've got a schoolroom full of children and each one has a computer, a tablet, or something that they're communicating with, and they're all putting out these signals that to the point where it's really these things do have effects. And let me just say, I've been working on a paper on Wi-Fi health issues. And there are 16 papers now that have published, health issues of Wi-Fi. And most of those actually have looked at things that are similar to what have been looked at with other kinds of EMFs. And so there are no obvious differences. The claim that Wi-Fi is safe, that the levels are lower and stuff, just doesn't hold up when you look at these studies. And so you do have, like damage to the DNA of the cells. You do have male infertility has been studied a lot more than female because it's easier to study. You do have male infertility. You do have effects on the brain, on brain function. And those are all things that, have been studied with other kinds of EMFs.
It's interesting. We have about 5 minutes left on the interview there. I was just wondering, while you were talking there, is there any kind of meter or equipment that you would recommend for people that they could buy to do testing? Because I know that we had Walter Graham on the show, and Walter's a good friend of the show, and Walter had a smog detector device, and basically had a different sound depending on what radiation picked up. And it was a very good device, but unfortunately the company that produced it are not producing it at the moment. They're planning to do it, but they're not doing it yet. And it'd be great to have a fairly cheap device that people could carry around with and be able to scan the local area and find out whether, what kind of radiation's in the local area. Do you use anything that you could recommend for people?
Well, I do, and I'm trying to remember what the brand name is on it. Actually. Maybe it'll come to me before the end of the interview. But one of the things, I just read an article recently where they claimed they looked at a number of different meters, and all the meters that they looked at had some real...
Oh, you're gone again. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you back there.
Okay. I see what happened. It popped off the screen here. The thing popped off the screen. I don't know why. Okay. Anyway, so they looked at different meters, and they found the different meters, they each had drawbacks to them. And I really don't know enough about this to give you a general, I'm sorry, the meter that I have is a cornet meter. And, it seems to be useful, and it certainly, gives you huge range. I mean, the thing about cornet meter is you get huge ranges that it will read under. Are you with me?
Yeah. Is that the meter that has a green and directional antenna on the top of it?
No.
No.
No, it's not. No. It's a little handheld thing. It's a small thing. It's not it doesn't have a big antenna on it or anything like that. It's relatively cheap. I think I paid about $140 or $50 for mine, something like that.
Yeah, Steve just showed me a picture of it there. Does that have the different sounds depending on the radiation it picks up?
The one that I have, let's see, I don't think it has a sound. It has a scale that you can look at. I mean, it has a scale that goes up, different colors and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and it also has a numerical scale on it that you can read, numbers. And so it will vary, it will range over, I don't know, something like a factor of 10,000, which is really extremely wide. In terms of intensities, and so that's useful. I don't, but again, I don't. This was recommended to me, and I do use it, and I think it's a pretty good one. But but I just read that it has some drawbacks. So anyway.
Okay. So well, I suppose at the end of the day, if you want to get a really good piece of kit, you're going to have to spend the money on it, I suppose,
Well, it wasn't clear to me, some things, okay, so the cornet meter doesn't measure very, very short pulses. It doesn't measure those. The problem, part of the problem here is that we're not just looking at intensities, there are other things that come into it. And so it's complex, and it's but still in all, having a meter like that is useful, and you can certainly tell if you're getting exposed to quite high levels. easily.
Something you can carry around as well.
Yeah,
it's portable.
Yeah. The only drawback I know of for carrying around is if you turn it on a lot, it tends to run the battery down very quickly. So you have to put in a new 9-volt battery all the time. But,
okay.
That's all right, I guess.
Well, that's handy to let people know. Well, Dr. Martin, we've reached that time. Thank you very much for coming on to the show. That's fantastic information for a lot of people who are concerned about the wireless technology and what's going on. And that kind of, again, you're one of many that has come on the show and clarified the danger of wireless technology. And people will just have to go and do their own investigations and check it out. But with people like yourself doing the investigation and doing the checking and releasing papers, informing people of the dangers, it is a big help. And we appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks very much for doing that. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your details off you and where people can find out where your website is, an email address, or YouTube videos and stuff like that. So over to you, Steve. Thanks again, Dr. Martin.
Okay.
Yeah, and likewise for me, I don't know where the 2 hours have gone. I've literally flown in, but great information, a lot of interest on both of the chat rooms there in relation to the information that you've given us. We have got the NERF 2 information that's up there, so that's been posted on both chat rooms as well. We've also had a look at that Cornet meter. We're going to check that out after the show as well. Is there any? Do you have a website, Dr. Martin, where people can go and check out, or even your YouTube video?
Let my website go actually before I actually got involved in this area, but because the person who was taking care of it wouldn't do it anymore. I didn't really know how to do it myself. So, but and with regard to the YouTube videos, okay, so I'm traveling now. I don't have the information with me, but if you can just Google, YouTube and put my name, Martin Pall in, and there are several good YouTube videos that, at least things that I like, and one of them is the one I did in Norway. So you can put down, you put Norway in there and you can find it. Another one is one that I did at the 2015 building biology meeting, so you can just put building biology in there and you should be able to find it. There's a third one that was done at a meeting that was run by the Santa Clara Medical Association in Santa Clara, California, that I think was also very good. So you can probably find that one there as well if you Google it appropriately.
So basically, I mean, if they just stick your name into either YouTube or into a search engine, they'll find something anyway.
Well, and I'm thinking if you put it, you can search with my name and with YouTube and Electromagnetic, and you'll find some things. But I've got other videos that are on other topics, and so if you're not interested in those, you don't want to be searching for them. If you just put my name in, you'll find other things as well. So anyway, okay.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's brilliant. Thanks a lot again for coming on. Just stay with us there for a minute, Dr. Martin. We're going to go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back, yeah. The great information there from Dr. Martin. We were calling Dr. Martin Pall, Dr. Martin Pall. Paul, I think is how you pronounce it. But great information. We didn't actually ask him to come on and do a part 2, but I think he enjoyed himself anyway. So I'm sure he will if required.
Well, brilliant information. It's just funny that you played Fleetwood Mac. I was just thinking, we actually seen that live.
We did.
With the real band.
We did. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway, that's another show. Right, we have an email in from, I don't know whether it's male or female, Javari from Tampa in Florida. And they say, where can you live that has less of this radiation? I think besides making us physically sick, it makes us violent and unable to meditate. Well, it's a good question. Where can you go? Obviously, out in the country somewhere where there's very little pollution.
Where was it those monks live? Was it up some mountain? I can't remember the name of the monks. I do apologise. But wasn't there some monks who were up living somewhere and they came down after something like 25 years living up on high altitude?
That was with Enoch Crane when they came down to speak to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm guessing they wouldn't have much Wi-Fi up there.
I reckon. I mean, you're going to have to travel out. In Sweden, as we say, it's a recognised condition. Somebody said also that in France it's recognised as well. And they moved them out to the countryside, just away from the smog. And it's not really a solution. You're kind of treating the symptom, not the cause. And we have had people on the show suffering from EHS over here in Ireland, and it's just very debilitating for them. One lady was moving around all the time because it was just really, really bad for her. Now, certain skeptics out there who don't believe in EHS think it's all psychological, but tell that to a sufferer. Tell that to somebody who's suffering from it. And I'm sure we have hundreds of people in Ireland that are suffering from EHS, and maybe they don't realise what it is.
Exactly. Just going to say that. They probably don't even know what it is. They're probably back and forward to the GP week after week and getting treated and put on medication for this, that and the other.
Yeah.
You know, what was the one that was a couple of years ago? ME, chronic fatigue syndrome and stuff. You know, there's loads of them out there.
The yuppie flu and all that kind of stuff.
There's a lot of things out there that, you know, people, they wouldn't know what they're suffering. But I suppose the beauty that we have today is, of course, some people say you shouldn't do it, but if you have certain symptoms, I mean, nowadays you can go to a search engine, you can type in your symptoms, and you may get a step or two closer to finding out what exactly you do have. And for those who do have the EHS, I mean, I couldn't even begin to imagine how they would exist, because when you think about it, you can protect your home, you can use special paint, you can use the special curtains and all that, but essentially you'd be kind of confined to your home, and you would probably only go out for, like, if you had to, you know, essential travelling. Yeah. I mean, other than that, you'd probably be housebound.
You would be.
You'd be a prisoner in your own home.
You would be. You'd have to kind of order in from Tesco's and all that kind of stuff. Which
Domino's and the Chinese.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be good. It's not a good existence,
no.
And I'm sure there's people out there that are suffering from it. The other thing is the Irish Doctors Environmental Association, where Dr. Michael Kelly's part of the group, and they sent the letter all around to the Irish schools regarding the dangers of Wi-Fi, and it was just blatantly ignored. Unbelievable that these are medical doctors, qualified medical doctors, and yet they just ignore them and just go with the information given to them by the Department of the Environment, which is based on the WHO report. You know, because I emailed, it was Phil Hogan's department at the time when he was in charge, and they sent me a link to the that report. So I know that's what they do because I've tested it to find out where they got the proof. But there you go. Now, before we finish up, as we said at the start of the show, if anybody knows of anybody in Ireland that's used a promissory note to pay off their mortgage or bills, please get them to contact us, or if there's any information you have, please let us know, because there is a listener that's querying this, and we've heard so much about promissory notes, and Michael Tellinger did a video on it, but we don't know anybody in Ireland that's actually used one to pay off the bills.
Now, one of the listeners on People's Internet Radio did mention earlier that they said the official offer is a promissory note, but I don't know if I would be fully in agreement with that, because as far as I'm aware, a promissory note is when you hand it over and that's it, everything stops.
Exactly.
But I mean, when you're kind of using the official offer, you're still paying, but it's kind of on your terms.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a change of contract more so than an actual payment. I know you could see it as a promissory note. I know where you're coming from, but in where understanding of a promissory note, you want to just pay it and say, that's it, it's over and done with. That's the kind of way we're looking at. Right, next week, we have part 2. We're going to have Tolek back on. This time he won't be sitting in the calf with loads of noise in the background. And along with Tolek, we're going to have Ray Kasolantich and Jim Nichols.
Yeah, I was looking at that name earlier, and I said, I can't wait for the end of the show to hear Alan pronounce that.
I'm guessing. I'm winging it.
Yeah. That's it.
So there's going to be 3 of them on next week, not just Tolek, but there's going to be 3 people on next week, and they're going to be telling us kind of what's going on from a celestial point of view, their take on things, and we'll just see what's going to be said. So that's going to be interesting. Hopefully next week, we might be doing it from Studio 2 next week, because Studio 1 is getting a revamp, thanks to Chris, who's going to be helping us out, who's on the chat. And we're going to be doing a revamp of Studio 1. It might be up and ready to go, but then again it might not, because there's a lot of stuff that has to be done and a lot of stuff that has to be tested. But we'll play it by ear.
I can say Chris will be here, you'll be here, I'll be here. The beers will be broken out and there'll be no show.
That's it. We'd be fixing the world all over again.
Yeah. Well, it could be a drunken stupor of a show. No, there won't.
No. We'll be dead sober. So that's the news anyway. Is there anything else going on? Well, as we said, we have somebody who's an investor, is very interested, really good guy, who's interested in developing OYM, bringing OYM to the second level, and also looking at setting up an alternative media network in Ireland. Very interesting times. We had a great chat, 5 to 6 hours talking about this, on what the plans are. You know, I think enough is enough. We've reached the time there that we're not going to say alternative media. Maybe we should be saying new media, because the old media is just going by the wayside. We know the newspapers aren't being bought. People are switching off the TVs. They're not watching the RTE and stuff like that. You know, it's all propaganda. You know, people are waking up to it. So we need to have a new media system over here, and that's what we're looking at trying to do. And with the help of this person, hopefully we can get to that stage. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. But we will need help from people. We will need people to provide the content, video as well as audio, and so much more things that are going to be going on. So it's exciting times. And this is going to be part and parcel of making a change and making the difference. And hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, as everything goes, you know, because we only had the one conversation, but it was a very, very good, productive conversation yesterday, and everything goes according to plan, then you will be hearing more about it on OYM. For the time being, though, you know, let's just, you know, see where we go. We're not going to say too much until we have some, you know, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and we sort out a few things. But it's exciting times at the moment anyway, and something that we've been looking to do for a long time. You know yourself that we've been looking to expand and do a lot more, and you know, just expose what's going on, and that's the plan of attack. So we'll see what happens anyway. What are you up during the week? Are you doing anything during the week? Anything planned?
Not at this moment in time, no. I just, you know, back to work now in the morning, so that takes up a lot of my time, but, you know, we'll see what happens. That report there that Dr. Martin spoke of, I'll have a read of that as well. I've got that copied here to check out as well. But of course, you know, unless it's written from a layman's perspective, I'm sure I won't understand a word of it. But, you know, then again, unfortunately, a lot of these papers that are written by great people, you know, they do get lost in this PubMed and other such places. You know, they're lost there forever. I mean, you know, that's not the right place for them. We should have all these papers and be collecting them and sending them to every TD and every politician and every school and everywhere that has Wi-Fi. They should be getting bombarded with this information.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, people have this podcast is going to be available, so if people want to use this to wake people up to the dangers of the technology, then there you go, you'll have the podcast. Right, we're just watching the time. For myself, Alan James, have a good week, stay safe, hope everything goes well for everybody, and stay happy. And if there's any links or information you want to send in, send it to us on email, info@oymradio.com. And take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Okay, and for myself, Stephen George, it's been a hoot, and we'll do it all again in 7 days. If you're listening on the OYM stream, we're going to terminate now. If you want to hear more interesting conversation, stay or tune into People's Internet Radio. Vin is not there. Ray Hall is going to be on, so it's going to be interesting. So until next week, sayonara, and have a great week.